And now that the game is finally updated, it was time to work on the castle. So in the morning of day 201, I went to the research tab and unlocked Defensive Structures 3, giving me the tall gate. Unfortunately, I didn't have enough resources to unlock Defensive Structures 4. Later that morning, I then tasked my settlers to have more voxels to be mined out. I then watched them mine throughout the rest of the day. Day 202 was very uneventful. Other than just working in the mines, I went and set up the blacksmith's forge and the research table. On day 203, I added in the tall gate I just researched. There seems to be a visual bug here, but whatever works I guess. I mean, it does still look good and is functional. I then work on mining the stone voxels inside the castle later that day. More mining was done on day 204. I continued working on the castle's throne room the following day. I then made an advanced research table. I just noticed this very late, but for this day, I had to do some rebuilding as I had made some mistakes with my blueprint. And oh, I have also started placing the stone block floors and the stone block merlons on either side of the throne room. I have also added limestone block arches to provide more stability for the higher floors of the castle. I also did some of the quick revisions with my blueprint and more mining later that day. Again, I don't know why I didn't see this before, but this tower is one voxel off, so I had to do some revisions with the tower. The northwest tower was now symmetrical with the other towers. More mining was done for the rest of the day. I then went on to blueprint the next level of the castle. Oh, and I didn't mention this a couple of seconds ago, but I was visited by a negotiator yesterday. And so, I was abruptly awakened by the Church of the Third Coming the following day. And for this 100-day series, I didn't want to showcase my defense again. I've already done that in the previous 100 days, so this is probably the last time you'll see this. And I know there's a prisoner system now, but I haven't even scratched the surface of all the roles the devs had to offer before this. But I promise I will cover this, maybe in the next 100 days. After the incursion, I went and blueprinted more walls on the third level of the castle. I added limestone block arches along the other walls, not just for stability, but I really liked this look it had. And I swear this time, I really like what I did here. This may seem not much right now, but wait for the results. You'll see. Feel free to comment your opinions about it as well down below. I then designed the sleeping chambers of the third floor. Now this ain't Sims, so all the sleeping chambers had one design. It would be just mirrored from one room to the other. This smaller room in between the two sleeping chambers is not a storage room, nor an aesthetic washroom if that's what you had in mind. But this would be where I will put the shrine, and again, the design would be mirrored on the opposite side of the area, so I could place the shrines of either beliefs per level, providing quick and easy access to one of my settlers' needs. And just in case you are wondering, I skipped through most of the days because it would be just mining. And I wouldn't want to keep repeating myself of saying, and for the rest of the day, I did some more mining. But yes, for the rest of the day, I did some more mining. That's the last, I promise. Yeah. I just did some more stability work putting arches in the rooms and the common area. I've also started to build the doorway of the other two sleeping chambers. More mining was done on days 216 and 217. I built some limestone block merlons on the second level of the throne room, just for aesthetics looks really. And before I forget, I did manage to research the portcullis. And so to complete the look of my barbican, I built one. Oh whoops, I had it on backwards, lol. But something was definitely off. Where's the gate? I remade it just to be sure, and I built it correctly this time. But the portcullis was still not portcullising. Now that I got it out of the way, it was time to focus on the sleeping chambers again. To provide more food and wine options for my settlers, I went on and planted 2 5x5 plots of red currant shrubs. Which, by the way, pro tip, you can amass a ton of this fruit, and it doesn't get affected by blight. Or, well, never experienced it in my 400 hours of gameplay. I then again placed arches in the new sleeping chambers for stability, and I placed more limestone block floors in the ground floor of the barbican, and the throne room. For this day, well, let's just say I relaxed a bit and just watched my settlers build all the flooring. I know I said I won't say it anymore, but I just really have to. And for the rest of the day, I did some more mining. That's the last. I promise.
Yeah.
And for the rest of the day, I did some more mining. Look, I won't say it anymore. I'm pretty sure most of you have the firm grasp of how either mining or logging heavy this game is. Good thing the devs released a patch fixing the portcullis. Look at that gloriousness. Really adds a whole extra level of aesthetics compared to what I used to build. Alright, back to work in the castle I go. And this continued through days 227 and 228. And on day 229, I watched them build the 4th floor of the castle. And again, the following day, I have also decided to not take any more new settlers for the time being. Maybe eventually, when we get surplus for everything. And a very interesting fun fact, in all of my 400 plus hours of gaming, maybe my 10th or so playthrough of going medieval, this is the first time I declined a settler, whether be it free help or save someone. I just felt like sharing, okay? And again, more castle work was done on this day. And since I've done a lot of castle work lately, my supply of limestone block has nearly emptied, and so I went back to the mines for 5 days. No kidding, that brought the supplies back up to about 4,000 limestone blocks. And now that I have supplies, you guessed it, back to castle work I go. And by the 10th day of autumn year 1357, the 4th floor of the castle was almost complete. Now, I just have to fill in some of the stone voxels I mined out, because if I didn't complete a room with proper walls, some walls tend to have the outdoorsy mozzie look. I went to add more floorings later that day as well. And voila, 4th floor done. Oh, whoops, I missed a spot. I then focused on the interior design of the castle. And again, because of my lack of creativity, and to be frank, interior designing isn't really my strong suit, all rooms will eventually look the same, mirrored from one another. Also, I'm pretty sure that the wardrobe is a new addition to the game. Never saw that before. I then went on hanging torches all over the castle. Then, I watched my settlers slowly light up the surroundings of the castle. And by the 3rd day of winter, this is what I had so far. I also started to run out of wood, and so I went on a logging spree, cutting down all adult and dead trees within the vicinity of my city. I haven't done some trading in a while, so let's go do some good old trading. Well, the trader didn't have much to trade, and so I just got their 73 gold coins for some of my beeswax. I have also continued the production of winter clothes as some of my settlers were suffering from the cold. I went on tidying the throne room up since I was already finished with the tech tree. I also replaced some of the limestone voxels with limestone block walls for the rest of the day. And that continued until the next day. I've also decided to have an access way through here, and so I went to dig the room out and added some floorings as well. I was also starting to run out of silver ingots, so I had some more silver voxels mined out. Note to self, go easy on the expansions. I've always been cautious of having concaves. Very unlike me to have overlooked this one. But no worries, nothing we can't fix. Just adding in some more minute details. Nothing new really, just overwatch my settlers. Oop, sorry Osfram, not today. Maybe on your next escape. If you're still alive, that is. I honestly don't know what I was doing here, so here are some snippets of what I did. I then started to blueprint the last floor of the castle, starting with the towers. Next, the merlons. Then, the walls of the castle. And finally, the flooring of the 5th floor. I watched my settlers finish all the blueprints that I had tasked them to do. I then began to work on the interior of the 4th floor sleeping chambers. Nothing new, literally a copy-paste of the 3rd floor sleeping chambers. This was rather an uneventful day, And when I say uneventful, what I mean is micromanaged, like moving the limestone block pile closer to where I'll be building, and putting small stick piles in the castle, so my settlers don't have to travel far when refueling the fires. Again, another uneventful day. Just putting more floor tiles on the ground level of the towers. As much as I want my imagination to run free, throne room isn't really a room type in the game, hence why I decided to make my throne room into the Great Hall. The aesthetics still somewhat suit the room type if you ask me. Now that I got most of the building out of the way, it's time to talk about the elephant in the room. For many days now, I've had settlers become rebellious, and mainly it's because they lack food, and most of the time, they lack ale. So, I've began expansions to the basement as well, making the kitchen that will produce tons of food and ale for my settlers. I've also thought about and planned my endgame farming layout. I had no pre-designed layout of how I wanted to make the kitchen, so all the footage here is basically me thinking on the spot for a room design for the kitchen. And spoiler alert, nothing fancy, just a nice big square to house all the production buildings for the kitchen. Today, a lot of mining occurred from different areas, one in the Great Hall, not to mention our kitchen in the basement, and another down in the mines. So yeah, it was one of those days. I did nothing else but mine. And this continued until the following day. I can't really do much in this situation, as the voxels I mark for mining can only fit one settler at a time, because if I were to mine the whole section in one go, I might cause a collapse within the castle. And spoiler alert, I still did. I guess my pillars and arches in the Great Hall are too far away from one another. I watched my settlers mine, and slowly but surely, the kitchen was taking shape. Some of you might think that I should be using the new prisoner system, where the jailor can assign prisoners to mine on behalf of my settlers, and you would be right. But as of this recording, despite having a settler fit the requirement, I didn't have the other requirements. Soon, I will utilize all the roles the game has to offer. Stay tuned for that. Aside from just waiting for and watching my settlers to finish mining out the room, whenever I could, I would blueprint the walls and supports of the room, as to not waste any time, because I'm sure this would take at least another day or two to finish. Mining and construction continued for the rest of this day. And with just a few more voxels, the kitchen will be complete. Next step would be the interior. But before I could even start with the interior, I noticed a collapse had happened. And so I turned my attention towards the collapse, rebuilding and strengthening the foundation as much as possible. It took me half a day to repair all that broke in the collapse, but soon after, I focused on the kitchen, putting flooring, and placing all the blueprints of the production buildings for the kitchen. I never used the apothecary bench before, so I don't know if it should be here in the kitchen or in the workshop. Let me know in the comments down below. I then mined out a smaller room to store the carcasses from my hunts. Not only that, but I also expanded towards an underground freezer for my food stockpile. Better late than never, eh? I have also mined out another section where I will put all my fermenting ales. The theory here is that I'll be able to control the heat output with a single brazier in the middle of the room so I can make fermenting faster. Once that was in queue, I then micromanaged all the production buildings so I could fully automate the production of food and other byproducts in the kitchen. I started this morning blueprinting the walls of my cellar. And all that's left were the rocky soil voxels that I had put on queue to be dug out. And soon enough, my cellar was done. I finally have a proper place to produce ale and beer for my settlers. Now that I'm finally expanding towards an underground freezer, 5.5 in-game years late, I also built myself 2 ice boxes to produce ice to keep our freezer cold throughout the year. Hopefully, 2 ice boxes would suffice. I also got to finish my storeroom for the carcasses I would obtain from hunting. Nothing much happened this day other than just to mine out the freezer. And yet again, I dug out more of the rocky soil voxels, and later turned them into limestone block walls to have a cleaner look to the Great Hall. I have also decided to tame these 2 sheep so I can have a steady source of wool. Of course, assuming I keep them alive, that is. Other than my usual tidying up and micromanaging of the place, I also made a small shed to store my hay. This would also serve as a food storage for my flock of sheep. It was more foundation and stability work for me this morning, building more support beams at the second level of the Great Hall. For the longest time, this floor has been empty, and it took me quite some time to think about what to put here. And eventually I thought of putting a king or a queen's chamber, just for roleplay's sake. And two other rooms, namely the library and the infirmary. I have just gathered some wood to replenish my stock, and the fifth floor remains to be empty as I have still yet to think about a proper design for the interior. And while my imagination works at the background, I also micromanage some of the production buildings in the kitchen. Still no hint of creativity flowing yet, so I just worked on the castle's last layer, the roof. And now that I was experiencing support issues again, the creativity in me started to flow. I've started to place in arches, but even then, I wasn't 100% sure of the placements. I'll fix it eventually. I then blueprinted the two remaining towers of the castle, and by midday, I worked on the merlons surrounding the roof. I have also continued finishing the whole look of the castle, putting merlons on top of the towers, and fixing each corner piece of the merlons, and as well as splitting the last layer of flooring. And I did this with the three other towers. Then I just watched construction until nightfall. Construction of the roof and the last layer of the towers continued through days 280 and 281. I have also started digging another basement, and this time this will be for my workshop. I have started expanding on the freezer one layer of voxel at a time, making sure I don't cause any concaves. I also found myself running out of materials to finish the castle, and so for the rest of the day, I just mined it away. Oh hey, it rhymes! Pretty uneventful day today, so for the rest of the day, I just mined it away. And for the rest of the day, yeah, I'm getting sick of it. More mining was done today and on day 286. And since the mines heavily relied on wooden beam supports, I replenished my stock of wood by cutting trees near my castle. I know I said I wouldn't show any more incursions, but I just want to point this out. Some of you may already know this, but I just recently found out that building moats slow down the enemies tremendously. I just found it cool, okay? And because I just came from a recent incursion with trebuchets, most of this day was spent on repairing all the walls that has been damaged by the trebs. And later that day, I attempted to fix the support for the roof by making new arches and destroying old ones. And once the new supports were placed in, I then continued to construct the roof. I find myself in the basement working on the new room, the workshop. Again, nothing extravagant or anything, just a nice big rectangle to house all my production buildings for the workshop. And by the end of the day, the freezer was fully mined out. Now I just need some flooring to keep my food from spoiling. And once that was done, I then put the stockpile for my ice blocks to keep the overall temperature of my freezer cool. Next was the most tedious thing, transferring old shelves I had located in the walls into the freezer. But I'll save you all the burden and skip through the work. And by the following morning, all shelves have been transferred. I had some more space, so I added in a whole lot more shelves, also separating meals, raw foods, medicines, and seeds from one another, just to make my freezer neat. And now that my settlers have cleared up some space, I blueprinted the outer walls of the workshop. I also placed in the supports of the workshop, and by the 6th day of winter, all support beam and walls have been constructed. That just means I can start digging the rest of the rocky soil voxels. And by the next day, I've added in the flooring, and by midday, transferred in my current production buildings like the armorer's stable, stonemason's bench, and sewing station. I've also added in the bowyer's stable, blacksmith's forge, woodwork bench, 2 braziers, and some tool shelves to complete the workshop. And again, I just queued in a bunch of production to fully automate my workshop. I also expanded into another big room beside the workshop, and this would be a storage room for different materials needed in the workshop like leathers and ores. Next on my agenda was the library. Again, transferring old research tables and wall bookshelves that I've had for a while now into the new library. I've also added in 2 braziers and a whole lot of bookshelves in the library. Now across from the library is going to be the infirmary. I've placed in 5 infirmary beds and some medicine shelves to complete our infirmary room. I've also put in a table and chair just for aesthetics and roleplay sake. I'd like to think that there's a doctor or healer that would be working inside the infirmary. And later that evening, I put in a royal bed made from wool for my city's future king or queen. Comment down below on who you think it would be. David, the founder and a true pioneer, the very first settler Dartford has had for 5.5 years now? Or Isolda, the colony's drunkard? Kidding aside, this would be a nice role to have in the game in my opinion. Maybe a ruler could automate some of the things like negotiating deals from one kingdom to another. It's just a thought. I then focused back on the workshop storage room by placing in walls that I would have arches connected from one another. Now, I know there's still a lot of things to do in the city. Well, for instance, fix the hunger issue I'm currently having with proper farming. And not only that, but to also explore the new role system we have in the game. After all, that's what started this whole series. But before that, I do have 2 more builds in mind, and it is related to the different roles we have. And if you haven't guessed it yet, it's going to be a church for the restitutionists and a temple for the Oak Brethren. But more of that starting tomorrow.